Welcome back to A Powerless Mage Presents. This is the deep dive where we try to take these huge, complex ideas and really just give you the shortcut to some powerful, actionable knowledge.
And today, we are definitely tackling a big one.
We really are. We're going after a word that is probably one of the most charged words in any language, war. And when you hear it, you think of, battlefields, history books, huge global conflicts. But we're going to pivot on that.
A complete pivot.
We're going to redefine war itself.
That's right. This isn't about geopolitics, not really. It's about finding a core universal reality that, believe it or not, governs so much of your life.
Yeah, your challenges, your goals, and your ability to actually overcome them.
Our mission today is, well, it's pretty persuasive. We want to show you why taking on this more radical definition of conflict is maybe the most important tool for self-mastery.
Exactly. The goal is to move you from that feeling of being unprepared, of always reacting to things, to becoming what the source calls a warrior in your own life, someone who is defined by their readiness.
And we should start with a bit of a disclaimer here. The ideas we're going to talk about they're difficult. They present a pretty harsh view of reality.
They're not just abstract observations.
Not at all. They're meant to give you a really powerful, beneficial shift in how you handle tough situations. And we're offering this framework, without any discrimination. It's just a tool for empowerment.
Okay, let's dive right in then, because the definition of war you probably have in your head is, frankly, just not enough.
It's not. Let's start with that one, the traditional one. War is a state of usually open and declared armed hostile conflict between states or nations.
Right. Very clean, very specific to nations with armies.
And that's the problem. It's too limited. It misses the bigger picture of what conflict resolution is at its core.
It focuses only on the symptom, you could say, the armed part.
Yeah.
And it completely ignores the underlying mechanism that's at play everywhere.
Exactly. So we need what the sources call a resignification. We have to redefine the word based on its function, not just its form.
The concept is just too big, too abstract to only apply to countries. It's happening to us as individuals all the time.
It is. And if we can understand it in this bigger, more fundamental way, we can use it like a lens to, see our own challenges more clearly and actually navigate them successfully.
So if it's not tanks and soldiers, what is it? What's the core redefinition here?
Okay, here it is. The universal principle is this. War is not merely a conflict, but a universal agreement to solve a conflict by showing superiority.
Wow. Okay, that changes everything. An agreement to solve a conflict by showing superiority. It takes the focus completely off the violence, which may or may not be there, and puts it squarely on the demonstration, the performance.
That's it. It's about performance under pressure.
But we have to define superiority. That is a very loaded word. What does it mean in this context? Because it can sound really negative.
It can, and the source is very careful about this. It's a broad term, but it's the right one here. Superiority just means superiority in whatever is necessary to win.
Okay, so it's situational.
Entirely situational. It's not about being a superior person or having some kind of moral high ground. It's about having the specific skills, the resources, the mindset needed for that specific challenge.
So you're not talking about being genetically better or something dangerous like that. You're talking about superiority of focus, of preparation.
Yes, or superiority of patience, superiority of financial planning. It's a competitive edge in a very specific, defined area.
Okay, that makes sense. History is full of examples of this, right?
Absolutely. Take the Zulus in the 19th century. On paper, they were facing European forces with, vastly superior weaponry, rifles, cannons, the works.
But they won a lot.
They did, and sometimes in a huge way. Why? They demonstrated superiority in other areas. In tactics, in their knowledge of the terrain, in their discipline, they were superior in the things that mattered for the kind of fight they created.
So their opponent's superior technology didn't matter when they were outmaneuvered.
Exactly. The Zulus basically said, your guns are better, but our speed, our organization, our use of the land, that's more superior in this specific battle.
It's a perfect example of that situational competence. What about other examples?
Think about the ancient Greeks against the massive Persian armies. They were always outnumbered, sometimes ridiculously so.
So they couldn't win on numbers.
No way. Their superiority was in their social structure, in their military formations like the phalanx, and in a culture that really valued strategic thinking. They showed superiority in organization and psychological toughness. And that beat sheer numbers.
And this even applies to conflicts where there's no fighting at all. The source brings up the Cold War.
A perfect modern example. The Cold War was, by this definition, a decades-long war. It was a universal agreement between two superpowers to solve an ideological conflict by showing superiority.
And it was fought on so many fronts.
So many. It was a constant demonstration. Who has the superior technology? That was the space race. Whose economic system is superior? Whose ideology is more appealing? Who can better manage their resources?
And the side that couldn't keep up that demonstration.
The Soviet Union. It eventually just collapsed.
Yeah.
The conflict was resolved because one side simply couldn't demonstrate the required superiority anymore.
So superiority isn't just one thing. It could be technology or strategy or just the raw will to keep going when things get tough.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really, really important clarification.
Okay.
Winning a war through superiority in one thing does not mean the winner is superior in general. That's a dangerous and, frankly, wrong interpretation.
Right. We have to separate this from any kind of moral judgment. If one company outcompetes another because they had a superior marketing budget, it doesn't make them better people.
Not at all. It just means they were situationally superior in marketing. This is purely about the mechanics of how conflicts get resolved. It's about competence in the specific area that's being contested.
So once this agreement of war starts, the old tools like negotiation, diplomacy, they're out the window.
Those are for preventing war. Once it's on, the source says the only mechanism left is the demonstration of superiority.
Which puts this incredible pressure on being prepared beforehand.
And that's why this is so valuable for you, the listener. It forces you to stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking a much more practical question.
Which is,
what specific skill, resource, or mindset do I need to develop right now to show superiority in this personal conflict? It demands action.
it shifts you from being a victim of your circumstances to being the architect of your own victory. So let's just pause on that for a second. For you listening, think about this. How does thinking of your current challenges, getting that promotion, fighting procrastination, whatever it is, as a need to demonstrate superiority change the way you prepare for them?
Does it suddenly feel more urgent, more strategic?
Okay, so that's the framework, but now we have to get into the gravity of it. Because when this agreement is active, the conditions are, well, they're pretty severe.
Yeah, they're absolute. This is where the framework gets really intense.
The source material is very clear. Under this definition, war has only two possible outcomes.
That's it. Just two. Submission or extermination.
And we need to be really clear what those words mean here outside of a military context. What is submission?
Submission is forcing the enemy. And that enemy could be a competitor, a bad habit, your own self-doubt, to completely surrender, to stop being an active opposing force.
And extermination. That sounds extreme, especially in a personal sense.
It does. It means completely eliminating the threat. For a nation, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
For you, an individual, it could mean the permanent destruction of a negative part of your life, like exterminating a crippling debt.
If that sounds brutal, it's because the reality of these absolute conflicts is brutal.
Right. When you commit to resolving something at this fundamental level, the stakes just become non-negotiable.
And this reality also explains why some conflicts last so long.
Exactly. A war can go on for decades because as long as a will to fight is still there on at least one side, the conflict is active.
So your personal war against a bad habit, like an addiction, or war against debt, it doesn't end until one side gives up.
It ends when the opposing force, the craving, the debt, either submits to your control or is completely exterminated from your life. As long as you keep feeding that habit, that war is on.
And the cost of being in that war, the source says it's profound.
It is. It says war demands the life, or at the very least, the way of life, of everyone who participates.
That's a heavy thought. Let's unpack that.
The logic is, if you're not willing to fundamentally change your life, to give up your comforts, your old routines, your bad habits, to win this conflict,
Then the conflict will take those things from you anyway.
yes, it will take your comfort by creating stress. It will take your health. It will take your peace of mind. If you don't willingly give your old life to the fight, the war will claim your way of life regardless.
That brings us to what you called a paradox earlier, this idea of war as an agreement. Because someone listening might be thinking, wait a minute, I didn't agree to get sick, or I didn't agree for my company to face a hostile competitor. How is that an agreement?
And that's a fair question. This is the critical insight. It only takes one side to start the war.
But it's still an agreement. How?
Think of it less like a contract you sign and more like gravity. You don't agree to gravity, but if you jump off a roof, you are subject to its terms.
Ah, I see.
So whoever chooses not to fight back, whoever chooses to do nothing when a conflict is forced on them, they are automatically accepting the terms set by the aggressor.
So your inaction is a form of agreement. You automatically accept one of the two outcomes.
Submission or extermination. By doing nothing, you've made a choice.
So if you're facing a huge pile of debt, a financial war, and you just ignore the bills.
You've chosen submission. You've agreed to the terms of financial ruin. You didn't start the war, but your passivity was your acceptance of the outcome. It's not fair, but it's the reality of it.
This is why the source calls war a primordial agreement.
Yes. It comes from something deeper than our rational minds. It's from our survival instinct. When you strip everything else away, conflict gets solved by one side demonstrating superiority. You're either fighting to prove your competence or you're submitting to a force that's threatening you.
It leaves no room for just hoping things get better on their own.
None. It demands that you actively participate and constantly improve because what's at stake is, well, your way of life.
That is heavy, but it's also incredibly motivating in a way.
It is. Which brings us to our next moment for reflection. And this one requires some real honesty with yourself.
Okay.
Looking back at a time you gave up on a personal challenge or a goal, maybe a fitness plan, a business idea, a relationship, did you, without realizing it, choose submission? And what was the actual cost of that choice in your life?
That's a tough question to sit with.
It is.
Now, we've talked a lot about superiority in these extreme conditions. I could see someone listening to this and thinking the message is to become, I don't know, more aggressive, to look for fights.
And that would be a complete misunderstanding of the entire concept.
It's the absolute opposite, isn't it?
It is. And you have to put a huge warning sign here. A core theme in the sources is this. War is not cool. War is the absolute last resort.
Right. There's a real danger in romanticizing conflict.
A huge danger. The sources are clear that resorting to this kind of conflict is often what, bullies or unsophisticated people do. It represents a total failure of our better abilities.
A failure of diplomacy. A failure of communication.
It signifies that our ability to negotiate, to compromise, to find common ground is gone. It's been exhausted. We've reached a point where the only thing left could destroy everything. That's not something to celebrate.
So we have to be prepared for it, but we should never want it.
Never. The goal is always, always to win without a fight, whether that's metaphorical or literal.
And that creates this beautiful paradox. The more prepared you are for war, the less likely you are to need it.
That's the wisdom in it. Your readiness itself becomes the deterrent.
The classic martial arts analogy of the novice and the master comes to mind here.
It's a perfect illustration. The novice is all ego. He's itching for a fight because he thinks combat is how you prove you're strong. He doesn't see the real cost.
He's trying to solve an internal problem with an external fight.
Exactly. The master, on the other hand, has this deep, quiet strength. He's mastered himself first. He knows that every fight costs something: time, energy, peace.
So the greatest victory for the master is the one you don't have to fight.
Yes. Their preparation is so total that opponents often back down before a punch is ever thrown. Their discipline, their presence, that is their demonstrated superiority. They win through internal mastery, not external aggression.
And that connects this whole philosophical idea directly back to your life, listener. You might be thinking, okay, but what does this have to do with my difficult boss or paying my mortgage?
And the answer is everything. Because conflict, in some form, it's going to find you. It always does.
It could be a personal health crisis, a financial crash, a global event we can't predict. And when it arrives, it doesn't care if you're ready.
And it will operate under those same extreme conditions. It will demand everything from you. And if you refuse to engage fully, the only outcomes are submission or extermination.
So the only way to be ready isn't to buy a weapon or learn to fight.
No. The only real preparation is to dedicate yourself every single day to becoming the best, most resilient version of yourself. You're building up your internal resources so you'll have them when you need them.
And that's what the source material means by a warrior.
Exactly. A warrior isn't someone looking for a fight. A warrior is someone who lives a life of preparation. They are disciplined, they're always learning, always improving, so they can meet any challenge with competence.
Their identity comes from the preparation, not from the battle itself.
That's the key.
Yeah.
You're not choosing a life of conflict. You're choosing a life of maximum self-discipline and resilience.
So here's the reflection for this part. When you're faced with a difficult situation, do you act like the novice, getting angry, blaming others, seeking a quick fight? Or do you act like the master, focusing on your own self-discipline and trying to solve the problem before it spirals into a crisis.
Where you put your focus in that moment says everything.
All right, let's bring this all the way down to earth. Let's apply this framework to some real, everyday situations.
This is where the persuasion comes in, to show you how adopting this worldview can actually work in your life.
Okay, so let's start with what the source calls the tamest war, something most people face. The job interview.
It sounds overly dramatic, I know. But let's apply the definition. Is it conflict?
Yes, you're competing against other people for one job, a scarce resource.
Is it an agreement solved by showing superiority?
Absolutely. The person who gets the offer is the one who demonstrates superiority in their skills, their research, their communication, their confidence.
And look at the outcomes. To get the job, you have to effectively exterminate the chances of the other candidates. Their loss is a direct result of your superior performance.
And that superiority is built over time. It's not just showing up that day.
No, it's superiority of research, knowing that company inside and out. It's superiority of focus during the interview, staying calm, being clear, and it's superiority of follow-up showing you were engaged.
If you do anything less than that, you're pretty much choosing submission. You're submitting to their decision, hoping for the best.
Right. And even if you do well, you can still lose to someone who prepared with more rigor, who demonstrated a higher level of superiority. If you see it as a war, you prepare differently, more intensely.
That reframes it completely. Okay, let's raise the stakes. What about a high-stakes personal war?
Let's use the devastating example from the source. A cancer diagnosis.
This is where it gets incredibly real.
It does. When someone gets that news, they are immediately thrown into a war with those extreme conditions. There are only two options.
Fight for your life or die. Submission or extermination.
And fighting for your life requires a radical demonstration of superiority. Superiority of will to endure treatment. Superiority of discipline to change your entire lifestyle. The body itself is trying to demonstrate superiority over the disease.
The source makes a really sobering point here, that many people, tragically, just don't have the internal resources built up to survive a fight like that.
They don't. They lack the physical resilience, the mental fortitude. They didn't cultivate that superiority of will and health when times were good, so when the war comes, they run out of resources.
But the warrior, the person who has spent their life building that resilience through exercise, through mindfulness, through purpose.
They enter that battle with resources already in the bank. They aren't starting from scratch. They're activating what they've already built.
And the people who do survive a war like that are often fundamentally changed.
Completely transformed. And that transformation itself shows you the immense cost, the massive superiority that was demanded of them to win.
This example really clarifies the stakes of self-mastery. You can't just prepare for the small stuff.
No. If your preparation only gets you through a tough meeting at work, how can you possibly expect to survive a true crisis that demands everything you have?
The preparation has to be constant. It has to happen now.
Which leads us to the ultimate question that this whole deep dive is built around. A question for every single person listening.
And what's that question?
Would you be able to survive that kind of personal war? Because the preparation, your physical health, your mental resilience, your financial stability, that has to happen now, during the quiet times, so that when the war comes, you are not caught unprepared.
That is the defining question. And a final thought for you to reflect on. Given the extreme nature of these personal wars, are you currently preparing yourself to be the superior version of yourself needed to survive and conquer those battles? Are you living like a passive observer or an active warrior?
Wow. We covered a lot of ground there. Heavy, but I think incredibly empowering.
I agree. So to recap quickly, we've redefined war. It's not just armies. It's a universal agreement to solve conflict by demonstrating superiority.
And that agreement is absolute. It demands everything, and the only outcomes are submission or extermination.
But the point isn't to become aggressive. It's the opposite. The goal is to become so disciplined, so prepared, so much the best version of yourself.
That you live like a warrior, ready for anything, from a job interview to a life-altering crisis.
This whole perspective, it's not meant to create fear. It's designed to give you a powerful sense of discipline and focus, to turn you from someone who just reacts to life into a prepared warrior, ready for any challenge. Don't simply take our word, put everything you heard here to the test. Make this knowledge truly yours. We invite you to share your ideas, your thoughts, and your experiences in the comment section below. Like this deep dive if you enjoyed it or found it useful, and subscribe to learn more about similar topics.
Remember, the power is yours.